Oregon might have some injury problems, and I think they'll be okay.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Individual standouts and the offensive line, how well have they been playing? Plus, Dan Lanning in that science lab again, cooking up another, really fun situation. I'll talk about that. And Oregon men's basketball starts their season tonight. I am excited. So, the injuries are, unfortunately, a storyline here for Oregon. Marcus Harper, Tez Johnson leave the game. And there was a noticeable drop-off with one of those guys leaving, and there was not a noticeable drop-off with the other one of those guys leaving. So, Let's start by saying what I know at this point in time until Dan Lanning's press conference on Monday night, when I presume he'll be asked again. I do not know if Tez Johnson's out for the year. He posted a heartbreak emoji Sunday morning on Instagram. That's not a good indicator. It's also not an official medical report, so I'd urge you to wait before jumping to conclusions along those particular lines. The indications are that Marcus Harper is okay. And that's the more important of the two. So in the second half of that game, the guard who came in was Kawika Rogers, who has been a tackle during his time at Oregon, but is clearly the next guy up along the offensive line. I don't know that we got a fair assessment from Kawika Rogers in that game because, he's going up against Mason Graham. So what we know is that Mason Graham is capable of bullying him, because that's what happened on several pass reps and a couple of run ones too. But there were a couple pass reps in particular. You can find them on YouTube, and you can just see, he's not as good as Marcus Harper. That much is very clear. So when Marcus Harper wasn't in the game, there was a drop-off along the offensive line. And by the way, I don't know about the Matthew Bedford situation. I guess he's just not up on the depth chart, maybe not at 100%. I don't know. I don't know. But Rogers is the next guy up. That's what they did against Michigan. So the indication would be if Harper can't go against Maryland this week, Rogers would play at right guard. But Harper is a far more important player to return than Tez Johnson. Even though Tez is more nationally known. Did you know he's Bo Nix's brother? He's more nationally known. He's got the numbers that are going to pop off the box score. But Harper's the more important of these guys. And the indication is that he will be okay and good to go this week. Hopefully that ends up being the case. But Dylan Gabriel had almost 300 yards passing. Traeshon Holden went off. Justice Lowe caught 6 passes. There are a lot of other weapons for Oregon to throw the football to. Heck, Evan Stewart can just get more involved in the offense. The passing game didn't suffer a drop-off on the perimeter, which is incredible because Tez is such a good player. But Oregon just has that much talent in this wide receiver room. That's where they're at right now, which is a really, really good place to be. But we don't know the condition of those guys, but I feel a lot better about the depth on that receiving core compared to the depth on the interior of the offensive line. Now, Max sent in a question, and you can always send in questions to YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, or become a Locked On Ducks insider. Link is in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial, and you get priority mailbag access. You get a bunch of other perks as well. Max sent me a question asking about Kenyon Sadiq seeing more touches and lining him up more at wide receiver. And I'd say two things. Number one, yes. And number two, are you watching Kenyon Sadiq? He's already lining up at wide receiver. He will line up out wide. Sometimes, I don't think they put him in the slot really, which is where Tez Johnson operates a lot. But Sadiq goes all over the place. And certainly that's a guy who could see more touches. But if your core trio of wide receivers, not including the pass catchers at tight end, who are of course really good, if your core trio of wide receivers are Evan Stewart, Traeshon Holden, and Justice Lowe, I still don't know, other than Ohio State, that there's a wide receiving core in the Big Ten I'd rather have. So I feel really good about those guys, especially with how Traeshon Holden played. It was great to see him have a big game after the incident against Ohio State. And Dylan Gabriel talked a lot about his personal growth, Holden's that is, from that particular moment. And he got back to being himself and showed why in the offseason, this is a take I would go back and tell myself, Spencer, you doofus, why would you possibly say that? My take in the offseason when I heard Oregon was looking at Evan Stewart was, it'd be great to have him, but I don't know that Oregon needs him. Nope, incorrect. Incorrect, because of course he was huge against Ohio State, but the reason I felt that way was, hey, I think Traeshon Holden can be a number one receiver. Well, he just led Oregon to receiving yards on the road at the Big House. So I think Holden's a stud. Justice Lowe looks really good, and Evan Stewart can get more involved in the offense. So yeah, I'd rather have Tez Johnson there because that's Oregon's offense at its full potential. But I think you face far fewer obstacles to having success on a weekly basis if Tez Johnson isn't there compared to if Marcus Harper isn't there. So hopefully Harper is able to come back. Hopefully Tez is able to come back. That would be a crappy way for Tez Johnson's college football career to come to a close. But could you see more Kenny and Sadiq? Yeah, sure. But I think the offense can pretty much run as it did before. And just insert Justice Lowe, and that guy could be on his way to having a really, really big Oregon career. I had another question sent in about the Ohio State-Penn State situation. So I said I was going to talk about this more on today's show. Alas, here we are. So Ohio State goes into Happy Valley and beats Penn State by 7, which did not surprise me in the slightest because Ohio State is a better team than Penn State. I didn't think Penn State was that good. I still think Penn State is overranked right now in the AP. We'll see where they are in the college football playoff rankings. Oregon, by the way, unanimous number 1 AP team in the country. I suspect they'll be number 1 in the playoff rankings come Tuesday as well, because Ohio State winning that game certainly bolsters Oregon's resume a little bit. But the reason that was a good outcome for Oregon is now there is no way that Oregon doesn't control its own fate to make the Big Ten championship game. Before, if Penn State had gone unbeaten, there were scenarios that were discussed, debated, thought about, pondered, and everything in between. Hey, what if Ohio State loses to Indiana and then Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana are all undefeated? Well, then you get to this, all the tiebreakers and analytics and all this stuff, and that's out the window now. That is all completely out the window. If Oregon wins its next 3 games, and I expect they will be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game, and they will play either Indiana or Ohio State. Whoever wins that game, it's in Columbus. Ohio State, as a look-ahead line, according to our friends at FanDuel, opened as a 13.5-point favorite. I don't know about that. I'd probably take Ohio State to win the football game. I don't know if I'd take them by 2 touchdowns over Indy. Indiana's a wagon. Indiana is a really good football team, but Ohio State beating Penn State is a very good thing for Oregon because now Oregon goes undefeated. Either Ohio State or Indiana has to lose that game, so either Indiana is unbeaten and the Hoosiers will meet the Ducks in the Big Ten championship game, or Ohio State will have the head-to-head with Penn State and Indiana, and they'll get a rematch in Indianapolis from that beautiful, wonderful day on October 12th at Autzen. So I think Oregon's in a really good spot. I know, hot take alert. Oregon, number 1 team in the country. They're in a good spot in more than one way. That was the outcome we were looking for, and we absolutely got it. Let me know your thoughts in YouTube comments or hit me up on X as always. The offensive line, I thought, faced a test against Michigan. I thought mostly they passed that test. They did get some help. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about 5-hour energy. Guys, I'm really busy this time of year. I don't always get as much sleep as I want. I've got a lot of things to do during the day. I've got 2 podcasts. I've got a bunch of play-by-play games. It's crossover play-by-play season right now with basketball getting underway and football and everything. It's a busy time. Sometimes I need a little juice, and 5-hour energy is what I go to. They've got Stan the Fan 5-hour energy shots with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like you, the fans who are first in the parking lot and last to leave. We see you out there. We see you working, appreciate you, and know you'll be there this Saturday at Autzen Stadium. I will not be, but alas, you will be, and loaded up with 5-hour energy. Who knows, no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of, you guessed it, energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5-hour energy, and they will keep you going all season long and beyond. Available on 5hourenergy.com and ship nationwide. All right, I'm going to get to my individual standouts from last week's game, and it's going to build off of this particular question that I got from a Locked On Ducks insider. Hi, Spencer. Love the instant reaction shows. Glad you enjoy it because I very much love those, and well, I see the numbers on YouTube. A lot of you enjoy them as well. Something to discuss moving forward. Our offensive line faced arguably the best D-line in the country and ran the ball right up the middle all day and 0 sacks. How does this game prepare us for the upcoming defensive lines we will surely face in the playoffs, like Texas and Georgia? Is there any other D-line as good as Michigan? Second thought, let's give some props to Poncho for a great game against NFL dudes, no mistakes, and the huge open field block-ish. I love that block-ish. He threw on the design quarterback run for the Dillon Gabriel touchdown. As Borat says, very nice. Threw in the accent there just for you. So, great minds think alike. Poncho was one of my individual standouts coming up later, but let's talk about the offensive line because they, once again, faced a big test and they absolutely passed it. That doesn't mean that everything was perfect all of the time. As I mentioned earlier, when Rodgers got in there and had to go against Mason Graham, there are going to be some film moments that he's gonna kind of cover his face and just look down and be like, oh boy, that wasn't my best. But Mason Graham is going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL, so that's not really a fair assessment because there's nobody on Oregon's schedule in the final 3 games as good as Mason Graham. There is nobody in Oregon's final 3 games as good as guys like Tyleik Williams, I think is the guy's name, the interior player for Ohio State's defensive line, or JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer. Like those guys, Kenneth Grant on Michigan, or the guy that they had back, the edge player, Stewart. Like those are all NFL players. They're Maryland, Wisconsin, Washington, none of them. And I repeat, none of them have got defensive lines in the same stratosphere as Ohio State and Michigan. There is an argument, and I think a lot of people would make the case, whether it's anybody at Pro Football Focus or pundits or coaches, that Michigan has the best defensive line in the country. Go ask USC, 4-5 USC. Go ask USC how good Michigan's defensive line is. They were causing absolute havoc when the Trojans went up there earlier this season, and they were the reason that Michigan won the football game. They're the reason Michigan's won a lot of football games this year. But for this Oregon offensive line to have faced so many questions early in the year, and deservedly so, they were not taking flack on shows like this one or others or in comment sections or online, wherever. They were not taking flack they didn't deserve. 7 sacks in 2 games, unacceptable against Idaho and Boise State. But they got it figured out. And it was that Oregon State game where everything clicked. They put Poncho at center, Strother at left guard, Harper at right guard, keep the tackles where they are, and everything was great. That game, 7.5 yards a carry, no sacks, and we saw what this offense can be, and it's been that just about every single week. So the offensive line completely deserves their flowers. As for the caliber of defensive line that they've gone up against and allowed 0 sacks in those 2 games, I have more thoughts on that in just a moment, but if you can do that against Ohio State and Michigan's front fours, there's nobody in the country you can't do it against. Nobody. Absolutely not. You'll face other defensive lines that are good if you make a run in the college football playoff, like Georgia or Texas has got a really good defensive line. I don't know that they're on Ohio State's level. I don't know that they're on Michigan's level. So the confidence in this offensive line should be really high as long as Harper is able to get back and stay back into the particular lineup. So I do want to get to individual standouts here because this plays off of the question. In case you think I just fire off the hip at this this particular program, not the case. I think about things because the offensive line played well on Saturday against Michigan. They are not entirely responsible for 0 sacks in that game. Something I've talked about last week and over the last couple of weeks, frankly, when discussing Dillon Gabriel, is how much more comfortable he looks running this offense and how in control he is. This is a guy who, if he starts every game this year for Oregon, will break Bo Nix's record for career starts in college football. He didn't look like that guy early in the season all the time. He looks like that guy right now. Heck, he didn't look like that guy against UCLA and Michigan State when he was throwing picks inside the 5-yard line. But he looks like that guy right now. He looks like someone who is in complete control. He knows his reads. He gets the ball out on time. He doesn't hold it too long, but his movement within the pocket is, I'd say, as responsible for Oregon giving up 0 sacks as the offensive line playing well and at least holding their own, because there were sequences where he was under pressure. He was under pressure in this game a lot more than he was, say, against Illinois last week, because Michigan's defensive line is so much better. But the same number of sacks were allowed. Actually, I think Illinois sacked Dillon Gabriel once. But Ohio State, this was a little bit the case as well, but I think Michigan's front four was more disruptive of Dillon Gabriel. But his ability to have success, no interceptions, be good situationally, against that front four and the pressure that he was facing, the number of times he did have to break the pocket, I think is a testament to how comfortable he feels and just how locked in he looks every single week. And quick note on Gabriel, there was a video of him going over and dapping up Oregon fans after the game in Ann Arbor. I love that stuff. I love it. I love it. I love it. Every game, Dillon Gabriel videos, he's a cool guy. He's a cool guy. I've talked to him before. He's a cool guy. He just seems like a really cool dude. Would be very easy to go out, have a beer with, and talk ball. So Dillon Gabriel is definitely standout number one. But Poncho deserves some love as well, because Poncho, yeah, he threw the block-ish on Dillon Gabriel's quarterback draw. Great play call by Will Stein, by the way. I mean, you can't time it up or execute that any better. And that particular quarterback run isn't something I think Oregon has showed this year. There was an RPO quarterback draw on the Evan Stewart touchdown against Ohio State, but that particular design, I don't think they'd shown that yet. I love that Stein is still, got some stuff in the bag, and I thought he had a really good game against Michigan. But yeah, Poncho, that's starting center. That's what you want it to look like. He's going to be the starting center next year too, and God willing, he'll be the starting center in 2026 because. I mean, he's not giving up pressures. He's settled down. There were a couple snap issues early in the year, and reports of that in fall camp, but it's all been clean. All been clean, good to go. Poncho's playing really, really good football right now. Pair of wide receivers here. Actually, I'll close with them. Derek Harmon again. This guy, first play of the game, he's in the backfield before the offense can even blink. He's got every move in the book. Every move in the book. And Jordan Birch certainly still working his way back to being 100%. I continue to think Derek Harmon is Oregon's best defensive lineman and maybe best defensive player. You can argue Jabbar Muhammad. I think it's Derek Harmon. I think if there's one guy that Oregon's defense would be significantly different without, I think the answer is Harmon. And he's just making impact plays every week. It's a surprise when he doesn't get into the backfield. I'm literally shocked when he's blocked 1v1 and he doesn't at least disrupt the play. He is crazy good and somehow continues to get better each week, it seems, because he just keeps producing over and over and over again. I can't get enough of that guy. So, yeah, Derek Harmon, once again, one of my standouts. If you got someone who you think deserves a shout out for their play last week, by all means, drop in the YouTube comments, shoot me a note, and I can get to that on Tuesday's show. But the wide receivers here, Justice Lowe, Traeshon Holden. Yeah, Evan Stewart was spectacular. He only had 3 catches. One of them was taken off. The best catch was taken off the board, of course, because of the penalty. But when Tez goes down, for Traeshon Holden to have his best game of the year, for Justice Lowe to replace him positionally right away, those guys were big time. And by the way, I shout out Dillon Gabriel, something he's going to see on film. When Oregon kicked a field goal in the third quarter, he made a bad read. I don't think he threw the ball to one of the verticals, one of the seam shots up the field. I don't think they were doing anything except clearing out the defense for Traeshon Holden to come underneath. Gabriel tries to throw it to him. He's not looking. He overshoots him. Oregon kicks field goal. Traeshon Holden's got his man beat for a touchdown. There's open field. You put it on Traeshon Holden's hands, he's getting in the end zone. But the way that Holden has bounced back and the way that Justice Lowe has embraced this growing opportunity. I mean, we didn't see a lot of Justice Lowe early in the year. We're seeing a lot of him now. We're going to see a lot more of him going forward. These two guys are not skipping a beat, and you can't overlook how big that is when a player of Tez's caliber goes down in a game, and for the passing attack to not miss a beat, those two guys or just making big plays over and over. And by the way, Justice Lowe is also a great run blocker on the perimeter, and I absolutely love it. So those are my individual standouts. And not as many on defense this week because you know what? I didn't love the way the defense played. I didn't hate it. They got put in a bad spot with the fumble from Ryan Pelham, but I mean, I didn't think that was the best defense could have played. I really thought there was a greater possibility that Oregon shut out Michigan than Oregon allowing 17 points. That's how I felt going into it. Now, give Davis Warren some credit. Davis Warren, he made some big-time throws. Like, he made some really good throws, the best he's made all year. Still did not hit 200 yards passing, of course, because that's just not what this Oregon defense allows. But, yeah, I wanted the defense to play better than they did. Like, if I were to give grades on either side of the ball, I'd say the offense gets a B+, maybe an A-, and I'd say the defense probably gets like a C. I'd say like a C+, like average, slightly above average or so. And the offense was good. The offense was not unbelievable, out of this world, incredible, but it was good. It was absolutely good, and there's nothing wrong with good because Oregon's good is the number one team in the country. So Dan Lanning is just a sicko maniac, I guess. Kind of stole Oregon 3 points. Stole isn't the right word. That would imply he broke a rule. He did not. He tactically gained an advantage for Oregon to get 3 points. I'm going to talk about that, and yeah, it's hoop season. It's hoop season, and we're going to wrap up with that on today's show. That's coming up next. Right after we talk about my friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Oregon likely to be a big favorite this week against Maryland. I don't know if the line is even out, but I'd imagine it's going to be more than 3 touchdowns. Maryland is not great. We could see Dante Moore in this particular game. I'm just saying it's a remote possibility, but whatever you want to bet in college football, yeah, FanDuel is indeed the place to go because you can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And guess what? It shouldn't be that hard to find a $5 bet that you can win. Yep, Oregon minus 24.5 against Maryland, according to our friends at FanDuel. I think they probably cover that number, or at least they should. Bet it either way over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, I asked you all to submit your favorite kind of plays or moments that you wanted me to discuss on the show, and Dill McGill sends in a Dan Lanning beauty. I think a play from Saturday's game that deserves more attention was the Oregon punt formation at the end of the third quarter that created an illegal formation penalty on Michigan's return team that stole a first down for the Ducks and led to a field goal, by the way. I think Coach Lanning and the staff's growth in their attention to detail and situational football from the 12-man situation against Ohio State to this are leaps and bounds better than even just a year ago. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think accelerated this growth and comfort in these scenarios in the staff so drastically. So, first of all, you got to shout out Joe Lorig, special teams coordinator here. Like, Lanning is, of course, in these meetings every week leading up to the game, but Lorig is the guy that is coaching him up, saying, hey, here's how we're going to do this. Here's where you line up. Here's what we're trying to do. And it might have just been an actual honest mistake from the Michigan player, not remembering you can do that because it looked funky. But guess what? That's why you line up in a funky formation. Because I don't know, and I cannot confirm that Dan Lanning orchestrated this whole ordeal, that Joe Lorig said, yeah, this is why we're going to do this, with the idea that they line up over the center. But it certainly seems a lot more likely than a standard punt formation, because when things look weird on a play you're so used to seeing from the time you're a little kid, for any fan, commentator, football player, whoever, you don't really know how to respond. You're kind of like, well, where do I go? And Oregon was stopped. And then they weren't. And then Oregon had a 31-17 lead. That made you feel a lot better. And I agree. Lanning did not have these sorts of things back in 2022. And it's why, back then, criticism that Lanning took for losing close games, or even a season ago, when someone like me comes back and says, he's a young coach, he hasn't learned everything, he hasn't mastered this yet, he's still improving, he's still getting better. We want to look for those markers as fans and say, okay, is he improving? Is he getting better? I think this is absolutely the hallmark of Dan Lanning's growth as a head coach so far this season. In addition to breaking through and winning a close game, the situational awareness has been phenomenal. And that's absolutely coaching. And by the way, Sharon Moore on the other side was called out by the CBS broadcast because they didn't know the rule about Colston Loveland catching the ball on a third down, and they challenged and they lost a timeout in the fourth quarter because they didn't understand, you have to control it going to the ground, and Traeshon Johnson jarred the ball free. And they were all upset with the call, and Gary Danielson saying, they don't know the rule here. Those are the sorts of things you learn as you go. You have to just learn by doing, trial by fire. And I think that Lanning's growth as a head coach is multifaceted. I think that is one particular example, but the game planning, the executions, the final scores of the game, like everything is better than it used to be. And I think there was a big jump from 22 to 23. Oregon had a lot more close games in 2022 than they did in 23. Why? Well, they were a better football team. Why? Because Lanning is becoming a better coach. And by the way, think about this. He still hasn't hit his ceiling. As a head coach, he'd come up with these, individual moments of brilliance that have worked out really well for Oregon and led to them winning football games. Lanning can still get better as a head coach. Why? I haven't seen him win a national championship yet. I haven't seen him beat Washington yet. Those are going to be a couple of pretty key markers for Oregon fans to evaluate him going forward. So I think it's great. I think it is great. And don't look at those moments and say, oh, that's what's making Lanning a better coach. No, that's just reflective of the growth he's undergoing, and I don't think you think about everything that goes into being a better head coach. Oregon had 2 penalties for 10 yards on Saturday at the Big House. Very impressive. Very impressive. Well-coached football teams don't have a lot of penalties. Those are the sorts of things that I look at as well. So I want to wrap up with a little hoops talk today. I know it's in the middle of football season, and I, too, am thrilled that Oregon's 9-0 for the first time since 2012 and just the third time ever. One of those times they were in the national championship picture, 2012, right until the very end when Stanford came to town and that whole debacle unfolded. And the time before that, Oregon went 12-0 and went to the national championship game. So hopefully it's the first scenario. But thankfully, I expect Oregon men's basketball to be very good as well. The women had a scrimmage against a team I hadn't heard of, or exhibition game, and they beat the crap out of them. That's great. Don't have as high hopes there. Looking for kind of a stabilizing year for Kelly Graves and company. But make no mistake about it. I expect this Oregon men's basketball team to be good. I was almost, not quite, but almost as high on this Oregon men's team entering the season as I was on the football team coming into this year. And I thought, you have a better chance to win the national championship in football than you do in men's basketball, but don't tell me it can't happen in basketball. Absolutely. I expect this to be an NCAA tournament at-large capable team. No more of this, you got to win the Pac-12 tournament, or RIP. No more you have to win the conference tournament to get the automatic berth. This team that Dana Altman has assembled should absolutely be able to put together an at-large resume. They should be good enough for that. So my predicted starting lineup, we'll see how correct I am. I think it's going to be Jackson Shelstad, preseason All Big Ten, stud. TJ Bamba, Brandon Angel, KJ Evans, Nate Biddle. And I'm telling you, that starting 5 can make noise in March. There's no reason they can't. That TJ Bamba edition, I'm so stoked. He's a hooper. He can be Kuznard 2.0. And so what Dana Altman's teams, when healthy, and Supreme Cook, the Georgetown transfer at forward, is out, so they might be lacking a little bit in the front court. They play UC Riverside tonight. They're 17.5-point favorites. They should absolutely roll. Don't want to have the Rothstein tweet where Oregon's losing a bye game, the epitome of brutality. You certainly want to avoid that. I'd also love to see Oregon get off to better starts than they have in the past couple of seasons in the non-conference slate. And they've got some opponents that you could look at and go, that could be tough. But there are a lot of games on this non-conference slate that Oregon should roll through. Like, they should start 5-0. UC Riverside, Montana, Portland, Troy, Oregon State. That should be 5 wins to start. Then you play Texas A&M. Then you play San Diego State. And then a TBD in Las Vegas on on November 30th. Like those games can get tougher. Then a couple of Big Ten games, then Stephen F. Austin, Stanford, Weber State, and then Big Ten play begins. They shouldn't have more than probably 2 losses by the time they really start conference play, which begins in earnest on January 2nd. 3 wouldn't be terrible, but I have high hopes. I do. I have high hopes, and I would love to see Dana Altman get this program off the momentum that they created last year in the tournament. Shout out to Dante and Kuznard because they were a 2-man wrecking crew. Get them back to where they were pre-COVID, which is NCAA tournament expectation, Sweet 16, good year, but really we're looking for that magical Final Four run. And can this team go to the Final Four? Yeah. No reason they can't. You cannot find me a reason why they are not good enough to make a Final Four run. So first game, UC Riverside tonight. Hopefully Oregon wins big, and we'll discuss that on Tuesday. Hopefully it's all good. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.